Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey through one of the most extraordinary civilizations in history, ancient Egypt. For thousands of years, Egypt stood as a beacon of power, culture, and innovation, leaving an indelible mark on the world. But like all great empires, even Egypt eventually faced a decline. In this video, we will explore the rise and fall of this magnificent civilization, uncovering the reasons behind its eventual collapse. From powerful pharaohs and grand pyramids to complex political systems and religious revolutions, Egypt's history is as rich and diverse as the river that gave it life, the Nile. Together, we'll look at the internal struggles, external invasions, environmental challenges, and shifting power dynamics that contributed to Egypt's downfall. Along the way, we'll examine the legacies that still resonate today. Through art, architecture, and even our understanding of science and mathematics. So, sit back, relax, and prepare to travel through time as we answer the question, why did ancient Egypt fall? This is more than a tale of a kingdom's end. It's a story of resilience, transformation, and the enduring power of history. Let's dive in. The story of ancient Egypt begins thousands of years ago, as the fertile banks of the Nile River gave rise to one of the first great civilizations. Around 1700 BCE, King Narmer, also known as Menes, unified Upper and Lower Egypt, marking the beginning of the first dynasty and the dawn of Egyptian civilization. The Nile, with its predictable flooding, provided a fertile landscape that allowed agriculture to thrive, making the region an ideal setting for growth and prosperity. The Egyptians built a centralized government with a pharaoh at the helm, who was considered a divine ruler, the intermediary between gods and men. The rise of Egypt was not just due to its geography, but also its people's innovation. Early Egyptian society formed around trade, religious rituals, and monumental architecture. Their early achievements include the creation of hieroglyphic writing and the establishment of an organized society governed by a strong bureaucratic system. During this time, Egypt developed its distinct cultural identity, with a pantheon of gods and a belief in the afterlife. The first pyramids were constructed as tombs for the pharaohs, symbolizing their eternal connection to the divine. This marked the beginning of Egypt's cultural and architectural heritage that would last for millennia. At the core of ancient Egyptian society was the pharaoh, the political and religious leader, believed to be a living god. The pharaoh's role was to maintain Ma'at, the concept of order, balance, and justice in both the kingdom and the universe. To Egyptians, the pharaoh was not just a ruler, he was the intermediary between the gods and the people, a divine figure with the responsibility to ensure harmony in both realms. The pharaoh's court was made up of nobles, priests, and military leaders, each serving a role to uphold the pharaoh's power. The priests, in particular, had significant influence as they oversaw the temples dedicated to the gods, ensuring the pharaoh's favor with the divine. The high priest of Amun, in particular, wielded immense political power and influence over the pharaoh. Beneath the pharaoh, society was organized into a rigid hierarchy. The nobility, who held land and wealth, were followed by scribes and craftsmen. Farmers, who made up the largest portion of society, were vital to Egypt's economy, but had little power or status. Despite this, the pharaoh's reign brought a sense of unity and pride, as the land of Egypt was seen as the favored kingdom of the gods, and its people as divinely blessed. The first dynasty of Egypt, established by King Narmer, was crucial in laying the foundations for the civilization's success. After uniting Upper and Lower Egypt, the rulers of the First Dynasty sought to solidify their power and establish a centralized state. The capital was set in Memphis, strategically located at the apex of the Nile's delta, enabling easier control over. During this period, Egypt began to see the development of its government institutions, the creation of tax systems, and the establishment of a formalized military. The pharaoh's power was emphasized through monumental building projects, including the early tombs and palaces, many of which were constructed with the idea of glorifying the pharaoh's eternal rule. The First Dynasty also witnessed the expansion of Egypt's borders, as the pharaohs launched campaigns into neighboring regions, increasing their wealth and influence. The tombs of this era began to take shape with the idea of preparing for the pharaoh's afterlife, with elaborate burial rituals and the construction of burial structures that would evolve into the pyramid complexes of later dynasties. The Middle Kingdom, often regarded as the period of Egypt's greatest cultural and political revival, began around Arsene Wushuwu BCE. After the reunification of the country, it marked the end of the political chaos that had defined the First Intermediate Period and the beginning of a more prosperous and stable era. Pharaoh Amenemhat I founded the Shu-Earth dynasty, ushering in an age of prosperity and expansion. During his reign, Egypt saw the centralization of power, with an emphasis on economic stability, military growth, and artistic achievements. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom were keen on fortifying Egypt's borders and expanding into Nubia, securing valuable resources such as gold and minerals. The Middle Kingdom also saw a flourishing of Egyptian literature and art. The famous story of Sinuhe from this era reflects the deep philosophical thinking of the time over, depicting the ideals of loyalty, duty, and the challenges of the human spirit. One of the defining features of the Middle Kingdom was the construction of massive public works, including irrigation systems. These works not only improved the economy, but also created a sense of unity among the people. The New Kingdom c. Ichen Wubite Wuzher Ichen Ling Tishers BCE Taj is often regarded as the apex of ancient Egypt's power, wealth, and cultural achievements. The pharaohs of this period, such as Thutmose III, Akhenaten, and Ramesses II, expanded Egypt's borders to their greatest extent, dominating both the Levant and Nubia. Under the leadership of Thutmose III, Egypt reached unprecedented territorial heights, while his successor, Amenhotep III, ushered in a period of peace and monumental building projects. However, it was during the reign of Akhenaten that Egypt saw a dramatic religious shift. Akhenaten's devotion to the sun god Aten caused him to move the capital to a new city, Akhetaten, and instigate a religious revolution that briefly disrupted the traditional polytheistic system. Despite the religious upheaval, Egypt continued to flourish under the reign of Ramesses II, who became one of Egypt's most powerful and influential pharaohs. Known as Ramesses the Great, his military victories, including the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, solidified his status as a hero. Ramesses II also oversaw the construction of many monumental structures, including the temples of Abu Simbel. The New Kingdom also saw advancements in art, literature, and military technology. The Egyptians developed the chariot as a weapon of war, and their architectural skills produced some of the most impressive monuments in history, many of which still stand today. Ancient Egypt is renowned for its architectural achievements, some of which continue to awe the world today. The Egyptians' ability to build grand monuments, such as the pyramids, temples, and obelisks, demonstrated not only their technical prowess, but also their deep devotion to their gods and pharaohs. The construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza during the Fourth Dynasty marked one of the greatest feats in human history. Pharaoh Khufu's pyramid is the largest of them all and was once the tallest structure on earth. These monumental tombs were intended to ensure the pharaoh's safe journey into the afterlife and demonstrate his divine power. Temples also played a critical role in Egyptian architecture. The Temple of Karnak, dedicated to the god Amun, is a testament to the grandeur and intricacy of Egyptian religious structures. The temple complex, with its massive columns and intricate carvings, was the center of worship for centuries. The Egyptians also mastered the art of carving obelisks, tall, four-sided stone columns, with a pyramidion on top. These obelisks, often inscribed with hieroglyphic text, were erected at the entrances of temples to honor the gods and commemorate the achievements of the pharaohs. The construction of these immense structures required the labor of thousands of workers, including skilled craftsmen, engineers, and laborers. Despite the harsh condition, the Egyptians' ingenuity and organization allowed them to create architectural wonders that have stood the test of time. Religion was central to every aspect of life in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians worshipped a vast pantheon of gods, each associated with different aspects of life, from creation and the afterlife to the forces of nature. The pharaoh, as both a political and religious figure, was seen as the divine representative of the gods on earth. At the heart of Egyptian religion was the belief in the afterlife, a continuation of life after death in the field of reeds, a paradise where the soul could live in peace. To ensure a successful journey to the afterlife, Egyptians performed elaborate burial rites and built monumental tombs, such as the pyramids, which would house their bodies and possessions. The most important gods in the Egyptian pantheon were Ra, the sun god, Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood. Each god had temples dedicated to their worship, and the priests played an essential role in performing rituals to honor the gods and ensure Egypt's prosperity. The pharaohs, who were believed to be the earthly embodiments of the gods, often initiated religious reforms to ensure divine favor. One of the most notable examples of religious change came during the reign of Akhenaten, who introduced the worship of the sun god Aten, shifting Egypt away from its traditional polytheistic beliefs. This revolutionary change, however, was short-lived and eventually reverted to the old gods after Akhenaten's death. Egypt's military played a critical role in the maintenance and expansion of the empire. With its strategic location in northeastern Africa, Egypt faced threats from foreign invaders, including the Hittites, Nubians, and Libyans. To protect its borders, the pharaohs maintained a well-trained and disciplined army, which was crucial to Egypt's longevity. The army of Egypt was composed of various units, including infantry, archers, and chariotry. The most famous of these were the chariotry, which were highly mobile and effective in battle. The Egyptians were among the first to use chariots in warfare, and their skill with the chariot became legendary. In addition to chariotry, the Egyptian infantry was well equipped with shields, spears, and swords. The soldiers wore leather armor and carried large shields for protection. The pharaoh often led his army into battle, ensuring that Egypt's enemies understood the power and might of the nation. One of the most significant military campaigns in Egyptian history was the Battle of Kadesh, fought by Ramesses II against the Hittites. The battle, although inconclusive, became legendary, with Ramesses II portraying himself as the victor in numerous inscriptions. It highlighted the importance of military prowess and full pharaohs' prowess. It highlighted the importance of military prowess in maintaining the pharaoh's power and Egypt's dominance in the region. The Nile River was the heartbeat of ancient Egypt, providing the fertile soil and water that allowed one of the world's greatest civilizations to thrive. Stretching over Ling miles, the Nile was the longest river in the world, flowing from the south to the north, and providing a reliable source of irrigation for agriculture. The predictable flooding of the Nile was crucial to Egypt's success. Each year, the river would flood its banks, depositing nutrient-rich silt onto the fields, ensuring the production of abundant crops. This made agriculture the backbone of the Egyptian economy, with grain, flax, and papyrus being the primary exports. The river also served as a vital transportation route, linking Upper and Lower Egypt and facilitating trade with neighboring regions, including Nubia, the Levant, and beyond. The Egyptians built elaborate riverboats to navigate the Nile, and the pharaohs often used the river for royal expeditions and military campaigns. Beyond its practical importance, the Nile held deep spiritual significance. It was believed to be a gift from the gods, particularly Hapi, the god of the annual flooding. The river's journey was associated with the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, as its waters not only nourished the land, but also carried the souls of the dead to the afterlife. Without the Nile, Egypt would not have been able to sustain its civilization for thousands of years. The river was a constant presence in daily life, inspiring songs, art, and mythology throughout Egyptian history. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, often referred to as the Age of the Pyramids, is remembered for its monumental achievements and the establishment of Egypt as a centralized state. It lasted from approximately Ursen Lopbait Bashaluk to Ursen Ebite Bashar E BCE and was marked by the construction of the Great Pyramids at Giza, the establishment of a complex bureaucracy, and the solidification of the pharaoh's role as both a political and religious leader. However, by the end of the 6th dynasty, the Old Kingdom began to crumble, ushering in a period of decline that would last for several centuries. One of the primary factors contributing to the fall of the Old Kingdom was the weakening of the central government. The pharaoh's power was increasingly undermined by the rise of local rulers, Rekedis, known as nomarchs, who gained greater autonomy over their regions. These regional rulers, while once loyal to the pharaoh, began to assert their own power, leading to political fermentation. Economic strain also played a significant role. The construction of massive pyramid tombs, such as those of Pharaoh Khufu, the Great Pyramid of Giza, drained the state's resources, placing immense pressure on Egypt's economy. Additionally, there were possible shifts in climate and environmental conditions, including reduced Nile flooding, which could have led to crop failures and famine, further straining resources. As central authority weakened and the economic situation worsened, Egypt entered what is known as the First Intermediate Period. During this time, the country was divided into rival factions, and the once great civilization experienced a series of internal conflicts, invasions, and political upheavals. The decline of the Old Kingdom marked the beginning of Egypt's vulnerability to both the Hyksos, a group of foreign Semitic-speaking peoples, played a significant role in one of the most dramatic chapters of Egyptian history. In the Second Intermediate Period, the Hyksos invaded and took control of the Nile Delta, ruling over Egypt for about a century GC. Ichen Lubite Wuzher Ichen Wubite Wuzhers BCE. The Egyptians initially saw the Hyksos as a foreign threat, a people who disrupted the status quo and challenged Egypt's long-standing dominance. The Hyksos were not only militarily advanced, but also brought with them new technologies, including the horse-drawn chariot and the composite bow. These innovations gave them a decisive edge over the Egyptian forces, who were unaccustomed to these advanced weapons. Despite their foreign origins, the Hyksos rulers eventually assimilated into Egyptian culture, adopting Egyptian titles, customs, and religious practices. However, their reign was marked by significant tensions with the native Egyptian population, who saw them as foreign oppressors. The Hyksos' rule was eventually overthrown by a series of native Egyptian rulers from Thebes, led by Ahmose I, who successfully expelled them and reunified Egypt. This marked the beginning of the New Kingdom, a period of resurgence and power for Egypt. The invasion of the Hyksos was a turning point in Egyptian history, showcasing the vulnerability of even the most powerful civilizations and highlighting the importance of military innovation and unity in preserving a kingdom's sovereignty. The rise of the Theban dynasty marked a pivotal moment in Egypt's history, as the Theban rulers led the charge to expel the Hyksos and reunify Egypt. Ahmose I, the founder of the Shubath dynasty, was the key figure in this restoration. Born into the royal family of Thebes, Ahmose's reign signified a new chapter for Egypt in the powerful new kingdom. Ahmose was determined to rid Egypt of the foreign Hyksos invaders, who had held sway over the Nile Delta for over a century. With his military prowess and strategic alliances, Ahmose was able to drive the Hyksos out of Egypt, re-establishing native Egypt. His victory restored confidence in Egypt's military and political institutions, paving the way for a period of unprecedented prosperity. Following his military success, Ahmose initiated a series of reforms to stabilize Egypt. He reconstructed the military, centralized the government, and revitalized the economy. The conquest of the Hyksos was not just a military victory, but a cultural and symbolic triumph, reaffirming Egypt's power and independence. This period also saw the resurgence of monumental building projects, including the construction of the Great Temple of Karnak in Thebes. The New Kingdom became a time of immense cultural and religious development. With the Theban dynasty at the helm of this resurgence, the New Kingdom of Egypt, following its unification under Ahmose I, became an era of military might and territorial expansion. Pharaohs of the Shubath and Shujoth dynasties, particularly Thutmose III and Ramesses II, transformed Egypt into a military powerhouse. These rulers demonstrated unparalleled ambition and skill in both military strategy and leadership, leading their armies to victories far beyond Egypt's borders. Thutmose III, often referred to as the Napoleon of Egypt, expanded Egypt's borders to their greatest extent, winning over Shu-Chi battles in a single campaign in the Levant. His military genius lay in his ability to adapt to various combat situations, including the use of chariots and siege warfare. His conquest of the Mitanni and other rival kingdoms solidified Egypt's dominance in the region. Ramesses II, known as Ramesses the Great, continued this legacy. He is most famous for his Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, where despite being surrounded, he fought bravely and claimed a personal victory. Though the battle itself ended in a stalemate, Ramesses portrayed it as a resounding triumph, reinforcing his image as a fearless and invincible warrior. The warrior pharaohs not only focused on military conquests, but also on protecting Egypt's borders, creating fortified cities and strongholds along Egypt's frontiers. This emphasis on military expansion and defense contributed to Egypt's wealth and prestige, cementing the pharaoh's role as both a ruler and a protector of the people. Ramesses II, known as Ramesses the Great, was one of Egypt's most revered rulers, reigning for an extraordinary 6 years. Ichen-Erbek Chisajo to Ichen-Erbek Isasan BCE. His reign is remembered for its military conquests, monumental building projects, and cultural achievements. Ramesses sought to secure Egypt's dominance in the ancient world, forging a legacy that would last for millennia. Perhaps his most famous military campaign was the Battle of Kadesh, fought against the Hittites. The battle is legendary not for its outcome, but for the propaganda surrounding it. Ramesses presented the battle as a great victory, even though it ended in a stalemate. His reign was marked by the use of military power to maintain Egypt's borders and secure its wealth, which was essential for the prosperity of his kingdom. Ramesses also undertook grand building projects, with the most famous being the temples at Abu Simbel, carved directly into the mountainside to honor the gods and immortalize his reign. The construction of these monuments was not just a display of power, but also an assertion of Egypt's place in the world. Culturally, Ramesses supported the arts, commissioning statues, reliefs, and inscriptions that depicted his many victories. His reign marked the height of Egypt's influence in the ancient world, and even after his death, his name and image endured as symbols of power and glory. Akhenaten, originally named Amenhotep IV, is one of the most controversial and enigmatic pharaohs of ancient Egypt. His reign c. Ichen Sambai Wususan Ichen Sambai Sancherloop BCE Taja marked a dramatic departure from the traditional religious practices of Egypt as he introduced the worship of a single god, Aten, the sun disk. Akhenaten's religious revolution radically changed the fabric of Egyptian society. He closed the temples dedicated to the traditional pantheon of gods and declared Aten the sole deity, shifting Egypt's religious focus entirely to this singular force. He even changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning effective for Aten, to signify his devotion to the sun god. In addition to religious reform, Akhenaten moved Egypt's capital from Thebes to a new city, Akhetaten modern-day Amarna, in the desert, where he built an entirely new temple dedicated to Aten. The city was designed with a unique architectural style, differing from traditional Egyptian design, and it became the center of his revolutionary ideology. Akhenaten's reign, however, was short-lived. After his death, his successors, including his son Tutankhamun, quickly abandoned his monotheistic beliefs and returned to the worship of the traditional gods. Despite the briefness of his religious revolution, Akhenaten's reign left a lasting impact on Egyptian culture and history, particularly in the realm of art and architecture, which became more naturalistic under his rule. Tutankhamun, the boy king, is one of the most famous pharaohs in Egyptian history, not because of his reign, but because of his tomb's discovery in the Valley of the Kings in Ichen Jubaid Asherar. Tutankhamun ascended to the throne at a young age, following the death of Akhenaten. His reign, from approximately Ichen Sambai Sanjarar to Ichen by Arsursan BCE, was short and largely uneventful, but his legacy has endured due to the treasures found in his tomb. As a child king, Tutankhamun's decisions were likely influenced by his advisors and regents, as he was too young to rule independently. One of the first acts of his reign was to restore the old religious practices and revert to the worship of the traditional gods, abandoning his father Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution. This restoration helped stabilize Egypt after the upheavals caused by Akhenaten's religious reforms. Although Tutankhamun's reign was relatively unremarkable, his tomb, discovered by archaeologist Howard Carter, revealed an extraordinary wealth of artifacts, including the iconic gold mask. The discovery of the tomb provided invaluable insight into the wealth, culture, and burial practices of the New Kingdom. Tutankhamun's death at the young age of Shubat remains mysterious, with theories ranging from illness to injury, but his legacy lives on as one of the most famous pharaohs in history. The reign of Akhenaten, with its radical religious changes and the abandonment of traditional Egyptian polytheism, left a lasting legacy of turmoil for Egypt. After Akhenaten's death, his successor, the young Tutankhamun, was forced to restore the old ways. The transition back to the traditional gods wasn't smooth, and many political and religious leaders faced the task of undoing the damage caused by Akhenaten's revolution. Upon ascending the throne, Tutankhamun, influenced by his advisors, quickly reversed his father's policies. The city of Akhetaten, where Akhenaten had relocated the capital to worship Aten, was abandoned, and the capital was moved back to Thebes. The temples dedicated to the traditional gods, including Amun, were reopened, and the clergy's influence was restored. However, the aftermath of Akhenaten's reign left Egypt weakened. The religious upheavals had caused social unrest, and the subsequent instability in Egypt's political landscape made it more vulnerable to external threats. In the years following the collapse of Akhenaten's religious policies, Egypt's enemies, including the Hittites, began to take advantage of the instability. The restoration of the traditional gods didn't erase the cultural and social disarray Akhenaten had left behind. The priests of Amun, whose power had been diminished under Akhenaten's rule, now regained influence, which, over time, contributed to their growing political power. The conflict between the monarchy and the religious elite would continue to shape the rest of Egypt's history. The collapse of the Bronze Age around Echen-Urbek BCE was a critical event that affected many ancient civilizations, including Egypt. This period, often referred to as the Bronze Age collapse, was marked by widespread upheaval, including invasions, famines, and social disorder. Egypt, once a dominant power, began to show signs of vulnerability during this time. The combination of internal strife, weakened military power, and external threats from groups like the Sea Peoples contributed to the gradual decline of Egypt's influence. The Sea Peoples were a mysterious group of maritime raiders who attacked several Mediterranean civilizations, including Egypt. Their invasions disrupted Egypt's trade networks and caused significant economic damage. Internally, Egypt was struggling with the costs of maintaining a large military and a vast empire. The reigns of later pharaohs, such as Ramesses III, saw attempts to defend Egypt's borders against the Sea Peoples, Pharaoh, but the threat was relentless. Despite military victories, Egypt's economy suffered. Tuat's economy suffered as the need for defense drained resources that could have been used for agricultural and trade purposes. The collapse of the Bronze Age also saw the disruption of trade routes, which had been vital to Egypt's economy. With access to foreign goods limited, Egypt's once thriving cities began to decline. The construction of monumental projects, such as temples and pyramids, slowed, and the pharaoh's authority began to wane. This period of decline marked the beginning of Egypt's long process of fragmentation, with Egypt ultimately transitioning into the Third Intermediate Period, a time of internal divisions and foreign invasions. The Sea Peoples were a confederation of mysterious maritime groups who swept through the Mediterranean during the Late Bronze Age. Their origins remain unclear, but their impact on Egypt was profound. As they attacked various coastal cities and trade routes, they significantly disrupted the established order of the ancient world, including Egypt's long-standing dominance in the region. The Sea Peoples are most famously associated with the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III, who was forced to defend Egypt against their invasions. According to Egyptian records, Ramesses III faced multiple waves of sea peoples who attacked from the Mediterranean Sea, targeting Egypt's western borders and the Nile Delta. These invaders were skilled seafarers and warriors, and their attacks took a toll on Egypt's resources. The battle against the Sea Peoples is famously depicted in the reliefs at the Temple of Medinet Habu. Ramesses III claimed victory over the Sea Peoples, showing them as a formidable enemy that had to be driven back. However, the disruption caused by these invasions had a lasting impact on Egypt's economy and infrastructure. The invasions weakened Egypt's military power and strained its ability to maintain its empire. The pharaoh's resources were stretched thin, and despite the military victories, Egypt's borders were becoming increasingly vulnerable. The Sea Peoples' invasions, combined with internal strife and economic challenges, contributed to the gradual decline of Egypt's once great empire. By the time of the Third Intermediate Period, Egypt's once thriving economy had begun to suffer from a combination of factors, including internal corruption, foreign invasions, and a series of weak pharaohs. The economy had been heavily reliant on agriculture, trade, and military conquest to maintain its wealth and resources. However, the weakening of central authority, coupled with a diminishing agricultural output, began to undermine Egypt's financial stability. The Nile River, which had always been the lifeblood of Egypt's agricultural success, began to see erratic flooding. The irregularity of the Nile's annual inundation caused crop failures, resulting in food shortages. This, in turn, led to famine and social unrest. The once rich farmlands of the Nile Delta began to suffer as the empire's borders became increasingly difficult to defend. Trade, which had once flourished under the new kingdom, began to decline as Egypt's influence waned. Foreign powers such as the Assyrians, Babylonians, and later the Persians began to dominate the region, and Egypt's once vibrant trade networks collapsed. The loss of valuable trade routes meant that Egypt could no longer access the wealth of foreign luxury goods, metals, and other imports. Internally, Egypt's elite class, including the powerful priests of Amun, grew richer, while the common people struggled with heavy taxes and increasing poverty. The imbalance between the ruling class and the laboring population further contributed to the destabilization of Egypt's economy. The once great wealth of Egypt dwindled, leaving it vulnerable to foreign invaders and internal collapse. The power dynamics shifted dramatically, with local rulers, priests, and foreign powers playing a larger role in shaping Egypt's future. The loss of the Nile's blessing was a significant factor in the downfall of ancient Egypt. For centuries, the Nile had provided a steady source of irrigation, ensuring the fertility of Egypt's lands and the prosperity of its people. The annual flooding of the river deposited nutrient-rich silt onto the soil, which enabled crops to thrive in an otherwise arid land. However, during the late stages of the New Kingdom and into the Third Intermediate Period, the Nile's inundation began to fluctuate unpredictably. The once reliable flooding became erratic, causing both droughts and overflooding. In years of insufficient flooding, Egypt's crops would fail, leading to famine and social unrest. Conversely, too much flooding could destroy crops and flood settlements, further destabilizing the kingdom. The unpredictable nature of the Nile's flooding placed enormous stress on Egypt's agricultural system, which was the backbone of its. As the river's natural cycles became less predictable, the government found it increasingly difficult to ensure food security for the population. In addition to the erratic flooding, environmental changes, such as soil degradation and deforestation, contributed to Egypt's agricultural decline. The overuse of land for farming, combined with the need for timber and building materials, for the vast number of monuments and temples, caused significant environmental. The loss of the Nile's blessings made it even harder for Egypt to maintain its once thriving economy. As the agricultural base of Egypt faltered, the kingdom's ability to support a large population diminished, contributing to the breakdown of its society and eventual decline. By the 4th century BCE, Egypt faced a growing threat from the powerful Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians, known for their brutal military tactics and highly organized army, began to extend their influence across the Near East. As Egypt's strength waned, it became increasingly vulnerable to Assyrian expansion. The weakening of Egypt's military was a result of several factors, including internal political instability, economic strain, and diminishing resources. After centuries of military dominance, Egypt's once feared army had become fragmented, and its soldiers less motivated to defend the borders. The pharaoh's power was no longer as centralized, and regional rulers, nomarchs, exercised more autonomy, leading to a lack of coordination and unity. In Lubai Chishawu BCE, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III invaded Egypt's northeastern border, and in the following decades, his successors expanded their control into Egypt. Pharaoh Taharka, the ruler of the Assyrian dynasty, initially attempted to defend Egypt against the Assyrian forces, but was ultimately forced to retreat. Despite a few victories by the pharaohs in the face of Assyrian aggression, Egypt's military weakness made it unable to withstand the might of the Assyrian army. By the late 5th century BCE, the Assyrians had established control over parts of Egypt, further eroding the pharaoh's authority and power. The Assyrian threat, along with internal instability, marked the beginning of Egypt's transformation from a powerful empire into a vulnerable state under foreign domination. In the 6th century BCE, Egypt fell victim to another powerful foreign invader, the Persian Empire. Under the leadership of Cyrus the Great and his successors, the Persians expanded their territory across much of the ancient world, and Egypt became one of their prime targets. The invasion began in Wubat Arsawu BCE, when the Persian king Cambyses II marched his armies into Egypt, defeating the Egyptian forces at the Battle of Pelusium. The fall of the Egyptian army was swift and decisive, 44-4, marking the beginning of Egypt's decline as an independent kingdom. Cambyses II claimed the title of pharaoh and incorporated Egypt into the vast Persian Empire. Under Persian rule, Egypt lost its political and military autonomy. The pharaohs were no longer seen as divine rulers, but as Persian-appointed satraps, governors. The Egyptian people, who had long revered their pharaohs, found themselves under the rule of foreign masters, who, while some local Egyptian rulers attempted to resist, the Persians maintained control, suppressing uprisings and reasserting their dominance. The Persian invasions marked the final blow to Egypt's status as a great power. Though Egypt would briefly regain its independence under native rulers such as the Sayyid dynasty, it would never again reclaim the grandeur it once held. The fall of the pharaohs was complete, and Egypt became a vassal state within the Persian Empire. By the time Egypt had been absorbed into the Persian Empire, its glory had dimmed, but it was not entirely devoid of hope. In the 3rd century BCE, Egypt's fate took another significant turn as Alexander the Great, the king of Macedon, swept through the ancient world, conquering vast territories, including Egypt. Upon entering Egypt in Sambite Sanjara BCE, Alexander was welcomed as a liberator from the Persian rule. The Egyptians, long oppressed by foreign rulers, saw in Alexander a potential restorer of their ancient glory. Alexander founded the city of Alexandria, which would later become the intellectual and cultural capital of the Mediterranean world. He also made a pilgrimage to the Oracle of Amun at the Siwa oasis, where he was declared the son of the god Amun, further cementing his divine connection with Egypt. However, Alexander's reign in Egypt was short-lived. He passed away in Sambi-Artisan BCE, and his empire was divided among his generals. Egypt fell into the hands of one of these generals, Ptolemy I Soter, who established the Ptolemaic dynasty. The Ptolemies, of Greek origin, ruled Egypt for nearly 70 years, marking the final period of Egypt's independence before its eventual conquest by Rome. Although the Ptolemies maintained many Egyptian traditions, and the culture of Egypt flourished, the power of the pharaohs was no more. The traditional Egyptian state was replaced by a Hellenistic dynasty. The final Egyptian ruler, Cleopatra VII, would attempt to assert her independence, but her defeat at the hands of Rome would mark the end of Egypt's long reign as a mighty empire. The Ptolemaic dynasty, founded by Ptolemy I after Alexander the Great's death, marked a new era in Egypt's history, one dominated by Greek rulers. The Ptolemies were of Greek origin, but adopted many of Egypt's customs, blending Hellenistic and Egyptian traditions. Although they ruled Egypt for nearly 70 years, the Ptolemies never fully embraced Egyptian culture in the way previous pharaohs had. The ruling elite maintained their Greek customs and language, and the official state religion was primarily Greek in nature. However, the Ptolemies were shrewd rulers and managed to maintain a semblance of Egypt's grandeur. They invested heavily in the country's infrastructure, building grand cities, monuments, and temples. The city of Alexandria became the intellectual hub of the ancient world, with the famous Library of Alexandria attracting scholars from all corners of the Mediterranean. The Ptolemies also supported the arts, literature, and sciences, encouraging the flourishing of Egyptian and Greek culture. Despite this, the traditional Egyptian religious system was sidelined as the Ptolemies promoted their own deities and royal cults. Still, they adopted Egyptian religious symbols to legitimize their rule, often presenting themselves as divine figures akin to the pharaohs. Despite these efforts, Egypt remained a land of cultural fusion, where the old Egyptian world coexisted with the new Greek influences. The decline of the Ptolemaic dynasty, particularly in the reign of Cleopatra VII, would lead to Egypt's ultimate absorption into the Roman Empire. In Censors BCE, bringing an end to Egypt's ancient reign, Cleopatra VII, Egypt's final pharaoh, is one of history's most famous and enigmatic figures. She ascended to the throne in Usur-e BCE, and her reign is marked by both political intrigue and the pursuit of Egypt's independence. Cleopatra was not only a shrewd and ambitious ruler, but also a woman of great intellect and charm, fluent in several languages and well-versed in Egyptian and Greek culture. She became a key figure in the political struggles of the late Roman Republic. Cleopatra's reign was dominated by her interactions with the Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. After the assassination of her brother and company ruler Ptolemy XIII, Cleopatra aligned herself with Julius Caesar to secure her position on the throne. Their alliance led to the birth of their son, Caesarion, who was later presented as the heir to both Egypt and Rome. Following Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra formed a political and romantic alliance with Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful generals. Together, they sought to challenge the growing influence of Rome's first emperor, Augustus, then known as Octavian. However, their forces were decisively defeated at the Battle of Actium in Sansari BCE. In the aftermath of their defeat, both Cleopatra and Antony committed suicide, marking the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and Egypt's independence. Cleopatra's death ushered in the final phase of Egypt's transition into a Roman province. Though Egypt would continue to be a wealthy and culturally significant land, its status as an independent kingdom was no more. In Centuries BCE. Egypt's final chapter as an independent kingdom came to a tragic and decisive end with the death of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, following their defeat by the forces of Octavian, later known as Emperor Augustus. Egypt was annexed into the Roman Empire. The fall of Cleopatra marked the end of over 7 years of pharaoh rule, and Egypt's transition into a Roman province began. Despite Cleopatra's best efforts to retain Egypt's independence through her alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, Rome's growing imperial power could not be resisted. After Cleopatra's suicide, Egypt's treasury, its resources, and its great cities were absorbed into the Roman state. Augustus took control of Egypt, establishing it as one of the most important provinces of the Roman Empire. The annexation of Egypt by Rome was not merely a political defeat. It also represented the end of a cultural and religious era. The pharaohs were no more, and Egypt's ancient religious practices were gradually replaced by Roman customs. However, the legacy of ancient Egypt would endure through its monuments, literature, and cultural influences, which would leave an imprint on the Roman world and later civilizations. The Roman conquest did not erase Egypt's importance. Alexandria, the capital, continued to be a center of learning and culture for centuries. Nevertheless, the fall of Egypt marked the end of an era as the mighty civilization that had once ruled along the Nile became a mere province within the vast Roman Empire. The transition from an independent Egypt to a Roman province marked the beginning of the end for many of Egypt's ancient cultural and technological achievements. For over 3 millennia, Egypt had been a leader in architecture, medicine, astronomy, and agriculture. But as the centuries passed under Roman rule, Egypt's once thriving civilization slowly began to lose its former grandeur. The great architectural wonders that had been the pride of Egypt, such as the pyramids and the temples of Thebes and Karnak, were neglected or repurposed by the Romans. Egyptian religious practices, too, gradually faded, replaced by Roman and later Christian traditions. The temples and shrines to Egypt's gods fell into disrepair, and the priests of Amun no longer wielded the power they once had. Egypt's technological advancements, such as its sophisticated irrigation systems, were largely ignored as Roman policies focused more on extracting resources from Egypt rather than fostering innovation. The glory of Egypt's past, its military prowess, its cultural vibrancy, and its role as a center of learning began to fade. Alexandria, once the intellectual hub of the Mediterranean, eventually became a Roman city, and the Library of Alexandria, which had attracted scholars from around the world, was destroyed, marking the loss of an invaluable treasure of knowledge. The end of Egypt's independence brought with it a gradual erosion of the cultural, technological, and political forces that had made it a beacon of civilization for thousands of years. Though Egypt would remain a key part of the Roman Empire, its unique identity was slowly subsumed by its conquerors. While ancient Egypt's political and military power ultimately declined, its cultural legacy has endured for millennia. Egypt's art, architecture, religion, and advancements in science and mathematics have left an indelible mark on the world. The Egyptians' monumental achievements, including the construction of the pyramids, the development of hieroglyphic writing, and their profound understanding of the stars and the cosmos continue to awe and inspire us today. The fall of Egypt serves as a reminder of the impermanence of even the greatest empires. Egypt's decline was caused by a combination of internal strife, environmental challenges, external invasions, and political instability. The lessons from Egypt's fall offer valuable insights into the fragility of power and the importance of maintaining strong leadership, a stable economy, and unity in the face of external threats. Despite its fall, Egypt's cultural legacy is far from forgotten. The monuments of the pharaohs stand as silent witnesses to the greatness of a civilization that spanned over 3 millennia. Today, Egypt's influence can be seen in art, architecture, religion, and philosophy, and it continues to be a source of fascination for historians, archaeologists, and travelers from around the world. In examining the rise and fall of ancient Egypt, we not only gain a deeper understanding of one of the world's most remarkable civilizations, but also recognize the enduring power of culture, knowledge, and legacy. Egypt's story is a testament to the strength of human ingenuity and the timeless desire to leave behind a lasting mark on the world. Thank you all for watching and joining me on this incredible journey through the rise and fall of ancient Egypt. I hope you've enjoyed exploring the fascinating history behind one of the world's greatest civilizations, from its remarkable achievements to the challenges that ultimately led to its decline. It's always amazing to dive into the past and uncover the many factors that shaped the world we live in today. From the grandeur of the pharaohs to the internal struggles and external invasions, there's so much to learn and reflect on. Egypt's legacy continues to captivate and teach us important lessons about power, politics, and the fragility of even the mightiest civilizations. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content on history's greatest empires and civilizations. Your thoughts and feedback are always welcome, so feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think about Egypt's journey and what you'd like to see in future videos. Thanks again for your time and support. Stay curious, keep learning, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.